anyways, you know, I haven't even thought of like how I'd really want to even entertain an intro to something like this. Oh no, I have thought about how I'd want to. So let me tell you something about Monster Sanctuary. Hi, I'm Ryan.
Um, Hello. I really don't know. I'm Jose.
There you go. All right. Um, and so, anyways, I played Monster Sanctuary a little bit, and I'm have a little bit to say on it. I'm just gonna have me and Jose go through a little bit of it live here and see what we can't get out of it a little bit. So, if anybody's familiar with Pokemon, which I'm sure many people are, I would say to some degree or another, this is much like a Pokemon. Um, I would say it's a combination of a Pokemon mixed with traditional kind of like turn-based combat. In this case, I have a party of 6 monsters, and I can choose at the beginning any 3 that I want to battle against. In this case, these 3 wild monsters. Everything you see here on the screen is going to be indicative of what my monsters are capable and what their monsters are capable of, as well as their levels and my monsters' levels. So, what you see down here at the bottom on each monster, so for example, if we're looking at Shiftry, you see a little wand there next to a sword. That means this monster can do both magical and physical damage. And then next to the sword and the wand, or the staff, whatever, there's a fire and a leaf, meaning that the 2 types of damage they can do are going to be fire damage and earth damage. And then above that, you have the arrow pointing up with a water next to it, as well as a shield with a fire next to it. Essentially, that monster is going to be resistant to fire and is going to be weak to water. And so that applies with every single one of these monsters. So if we look over here at Slime, Slime is going to have only magical damage. Its 2 typings for its attacks are going to be water and earth. It's going to be resistant to water, and it's going to be weak, in this case, to air, is what that little puff of whatever is. And so, pretty much, that should be fairly self-explanatory for each of the monsters here. And then, I guess we'll just go into combat. So in this case, looking at the enemies, you can see that they also have their own weaknesses. They also have their own strengths. In this circumstance, the Arumatail actually is weak to just physical attacks in general, and is generally can defend against or is more resistant to more magical attacks. Whereas the other ones are just going to be resistant to earth and weak to water. So in this case, knowing that, I can intentionally pick things that have water-based attacks and that are going to resist what they can throw at me. So really, all they have in regards to type effectiveness is going to be earth and air. So as long as nothing is really going to be weak to earth or air, I should have some sort of defensive benefit of that. But in most cases, I've been just kind of picking whatever has type effectiveness towards their weakness. So in this case, Punchy should be pretty good against a Arumatail, and I would probably say in this case, given I need some water for the Caraglows, take Bark, and either really any of these over here, all of them seem to have some sort of water, so we'll just take a Bombus now. And so immediately you saw there that there's a passive effect on my Pokemon, or my monsters, that one of them has an ability that's a passive ability that gives everyone shields on my team at the start of battle based on, I think it's a percentage of their life. So it's like 5% of their life becomes a shield for the entire team. And so in this case right now I'm on Punchy. I can switch between any of them at any point, and this is all I can do with Punchy at the moment, is essentially have a heal, Fiery Punch, Lightning Punch, Freezing, and Agility. You can see what the buffs do, 20% chance to dodge physical hits, and all of these buffs in this case, as it says at the bottom, is going to affect my whole party. As you see up in the upper left, there's a combo meter. The combo meter is fairly important, as in everything that you do has a certain amount of hits to it. So for example, with Ice Hail on Abomasnow, it'll hit, if you look at the bottom there, 3 times 60%. So 3 times is going to mean that it's going to add 3 to the combo meter, because it's going to go 1, 2, 3. That's going to be 3 hits adding to the combo meter. And then the same goes for claws is like 2 hits, ice hail again is 3, air sickle is 4, spectral frame is 3, so on and so forth. But this also applies to healing based effects where it says 4 times, as well as the buff. Given that the buff is going to apply to the whole party, that's going to be 3 added onto the combo meter. So in this instance, I'm going to start with Glory Cast because it's going to apply Channel to the whole party and Glory to 2 random monsters, which, as you can see here, gives me more critical chance and critical damage, as well as makes active skills require less mana. So we're going to start with that. And as you can see there, that gave me 5 buffs. And so that means now my next 2 attacks are going to do 25% more damage. So with starting with that at the beginning of my turn on this turn means that now from Punchy or from Bark, any of these attacks are going to do another 25% damage, essentially. So in this case, anytime you're scrolling over any of your attacks, you can see over on the right at the essentially the opposing team, you can see what is super effective against them is essentially it'll have an up arrow above that monster, and what's their defensive against, they're just going to have a little shield over, so that's pretty self-explanatory. And so in this circumstance, I would probably say, all right, I'm going to try and target down, let's say that, let me see here, what's my best play?
So I did have a question
Yeah.
regarding the up arrows and the defense stats. Does that only apply to monsters you've already combated, or
No, they just tell you right out of the gate. You don't have to have battled them like in Sword and Shield or anything like that. You just know somehow innately. You just know. Don't ask me why. You just know right out of the gate. Essentially, it would probably be better if you had to learn because it makes it a little simple when you first go up against a monster and you just go, oh, okay, they're weak to this. I might as well just take this. Winston. I'm just gonna edit it out. I'll just clip it.
should I go?
I don't know what he's barking about.
Yeah, I'll go.
And of course he stops. All right. So what, do you think they just drove off or something? No. Hopefully he won't come back in and start barking. So about, well, I mean, we'll know. So I'm just gonna act like that was natural in the cut. So your question was essentially with the shielding, essentially blah blah blah. And so, anyways, back to me trying to pick a move. In this circumstance, either of these are going to be effective in that they're both physical moves. Given that Claws has a sword next to it, that means it's physical. Air Sickle has a sword next to it, that means it's physical. And it can do air-based damage or whatever. Also, as you can see on each of those moves there, just like any move in this case, is going to take some amount of mana. I'm going to be honest, I haven't really had to worry too much about mana, because in between turns you automatically regenerate mana, and in most cases I regenerate enough mana where I very rarely, if ever, am running out. I don't know if that's just a specific way I'm playing, or if the game is just designed in such a way that you're typically going to have mana in most cases, because I very rarely, if ever, have run out of mana to the point that I just can't use abilities the way that I want to. You also have just like a base attack on all your monsters that takes no mana. You can use items, and then check enemy info, which again seems a little odd because obviously they seem to tell you what their weaknesses are right out of the gate. I've never even used this. I don't see the point because I guess in this case, it gives you a little bit more information as to like how much HP they have, what their mana is, as well as what their essentially their attack, magic, defense, health, and their mana pool is like. So I guess that's the extra information you would get out of enemy info. Switch monster I've never used. Apparently you can just switch it up whenever you want mid-battle, which seems like it shouldn't be part of the game to a certain point, because if you can just switch out of 6 and typically the teams you're fighting against are 3, that seems to defeat the point to me. But anywho, so in this case I'm just going to use claws against the Arumtel, and I got a crit, and that attack also in that case doing 2 hits added 2 to the combo meter, meaning I can now do 135% damage with my next attack. And so same idea, we're just going to keep going in, and I'm just going to go with the fiery punches. And of course, anytime that you're seeing on the numbers coming off, if it has an up arrow next to it and the numbers get bigger, it's a crit. Like you'd see in most games, bigger numbers mean you did a crit. And so given that turn is now over, our combo meter resets, and we essentially do the exact same thing to build up a combo meter. And this is pretty much the gist of the combat, is everything that just happened right then and there. And so really, most of the time, all I'm going to end up doing is just keep fucking wailing into the same Pokemon. Sorry for cursing. I said Pokemon again.
Yeah, you said Pokemon again.
Oh well.
I was like, a monster.
Monster. Sorry. And I mean, yeah, like that's really the gist of the combat. And I haven't really found it all that much more engaging, personally speaking. I don't think it's bad, but I haven't really found myself getting connected to many of the monsters, and it's just kind of been hitting a lot of stuff and just slowly but surely wearing away at the opposing monsters until they're dead. Or not dead, I don't know. They're not really specific about whether or not they're just feigning or if they're actually dying. And so you could say there's actually some strategy involved with, say, like, you know, maybe I shouldn't have him going first in regards to attacking, because I should probably try to build up the combo with somebody that has a lower attack stat, so that way the combo works to the benefit of the monster that can actually do the most damage. So in this case, given that either my Bark or my Punchy Man is probably going to be doing more damage, it's probably more beneficial they go second and third in the string of the combo. And so same idea, just going to keep on going. And as you can see against above each of the monsters there, you can see the buffs kind of like swapping over and over and over again to indicate that those buffs are still active. There are ways to debuff opposing monsters, and I imagine there must be ways for them to debuff your monsters as well. Kind of a lot of the typical turn-based strategy stuff. And so this here is essentially your result screen. It's a little interesting in that every time you battle anything, it seems like they're going to be giving you some sort of result in which you're going to get rated on a 5-star scale. The higher the amount of stars you get, the more stars you have, the more bonuses that you have in regards to your rare loot chance. So I only got 40% because I only got 3 stars. And the better you did in that battle, the more points you get, which essentially will encourage you to get more stars. Meaning the better you perform in battles, obviously the higher the amount of stars you can get, and therefore better loot, I guess. Same idea. I haven't really found this to be super rewarding, in that in most cases it seems like the higher the loot chance, the better chances are that you'll get an egg of one of the monsters you just fought against. And that seems to be the most intriguing part of this to me, is that when you fight against monsters, there's a chance for you to get an egg, which is essentially, once you get an egg, you hatch that egg and you now have that monster. And so in this case, lucky me, I got both eggs for both of the things I just fought, including some other stuff, which I'm imagining is for crafting. And you can feed your monsters, and that can give them essentially like buffs that are, I want to say, relatively permanent or semi-permanent, until you decide to feed them some other stuff, which will then overwrite those buffs. So let me show you that food mechanic real quick. And I can also show you here that, so these are all the monsters I have. My active team here is the 6 that you see. And then I have all these other monsters in the wings waiting. I can switch any of these at any point with any of the ones in my team if I so choose. All of these will have different attacks. You can look at their skills. So it has claws just like Bark, has slash, air sickle like Bark, fire claws, and regeneration. And so every single monster is going to have these different skill trees. And pretty much everything will start at the very top with, various abilities. And so Bark being my starter, I guess you could say in this case, has Air Sickle, Spectral Flame, Ice Hail, and Claws. Of course, at the beginning of this game, you have a choice between 3 starters. One's Earth, one's, I guess, Water in this case, and one is Fire. That sounds about right.
Yeah.
And so, anyways, they'll start out with, I think he only started out with like 3 of these abilities, and then I had to actually put a point into Spectral Flame. You get skill points every time a monster levels up. And all of your monsters, I believe, get experience that are part of your active team here anytime you complete a battle. All of the ones in the wings do not. So you just need to essentially move one of these monsters into your team in order for them to actually be getting experience. So you kind of have your own version of experience share there. But anyways, going into the skill tree system, it seems like most monsters have different ways that you can build them that is very intentional. Like you can essentially choose to make the same monster have at least 1 or 2 different builds if you so choose, if you really wanted to min-max it. So like Shiftry, for example, has stuff like Mana Overload, increase attack and magic by 15% of this monster's max mana. So that means, so like as you can kind of see up there at the top, I have 192 mana on this monster. And so that means you can also equip things onto all of these monsters. And so as you can see here, I have mana regeneration, which doesn't really apply to that, but I have plus 20 mana there, as well as plus 25 mana there. And so by applying all of these things to increase my mana, I can ultimately increase whatever that was it was talking about, my attack and magic, by 15% of the max mana. And so you can very clearly take a lot of the things that are in these monsters' skill trees and build on them to, like, same idea, increase defense by max mana. So in this case, you would want to be building a lot of what seems like mana on this monster in order to really increase a lot of its stats. And so, when exploring an enemy's weakness with an attack, trigger an additional 50% damage on hit. So it seems like it's, pretty, in my opinion, would be like mana-focused, mage-focused kind of build. But it also has some things in here where, like, you can increase its attack, or you can increase, like, it can be a hybrid of both of those things. And most of these monsters are going to, again, have multiple builds, where obviously you see here Punchy is going to be very physical focused, given all of its attacks are going to be physical, but it still has a heal. And so that means it can still be potentially built in such a way, as you kind of scroll through a lot of this stuff, for like every heal that comes from this monster, active and passive, has a 10% chance to apply Sidekick, which is a buff. Multi-Sidekick. Sidekick buff, this is an aura, meaning it's going to apply to the whole team. The Sidekick buff can be stacked 2 additional times. Additional stacks have only a 50% chance to trigger. And so you could build all the way into this healing tree if you really wanted to, and to say screw it to the rest of this over here. And I'm honestly, having not played far enough, I'm not sure if these are just like mastery, like kind of skills, or whatever the case may be down here at the bottom. I imagine this must be pretty great. But ultimately, like, so for Abomasnow, I would say, you can kind of build into kind of more physical damage kind of stuff with tackle and beating. Or you could build into kind of like a chill, kind of ice-based attacker. But really, I would say, to me, the most beneficial thing about him is that he has a taunt. He has a really high health pool, so I've just been building his health a ton, so that's why he has 2,271 health.
Ooh.
And given that he has Glory Cast, which adds all those buffs on, and heal all monsters in the party by 4% of this monster's max health at the beginning of every turn, I've essentially built him like a tank thus far, including Healing Shield, where anytime anything is shielded, right, healing skills active and passive also apply 20% shield equal to what was healed. So to me, I'm building him as a tank. Every attack carries an additional hit equal to 5% of the max health, so on and so forth. So I built him very tanky. And so that essentially applies to most all of these monsters. I'm not going to go into any more of them. And obviously with them having skill points, I can go in here and say, oh, I'm going to apply this skill point to fiery punches. But maybe I want to apply it to Cascade. Power of every consecutive hit during an ability is increased by 5% continuously. So that means given that this hits 3 times, each hit's going to get 5%. So, sure, that sounds good to me. And that will apply to not just the fiery punches, it'll apply to all of their abilities that hit multiple times. Same idea here. Go through, and it seems like there are a lot of little like neat effects in here. Every attack deals 50% increased damage when used for the first time during combat. Like that, that seems like an interesting thing to add in there. I kind of appreciate a lot of the stuff that they throw in here for your monsters to learn. I think the main thing for me this far is I really haven't been super engaged by the combat enough to want to stick with it. And I've just, like, in regards to equipment, like, I've gotten a lot of equipment to where, like, almost every single one of my monsters has full equipment. And it's probably not the most, how do I put it? Probably not the best way to kit each of them out, but they all have stuff on them, and all the stuff seems pretty good, and it gives them plenty of buffs.
So, being someone who's personally never played the game, when the monsters first start out, I hate to reference Pokemon, but do they have, like, any evolutions, or...
No.
So
thus far, and this is maybe... I can't quite say how far into the game, obviously. I don't think very far. There's not been any mention of any sort of, like, monster evolution or anything along those lines thus far. And I don't think that's the intention. I don't think they're literally going to take a Pokemon or a Digimon route to this, where your monsters are going to be getting, like, literally evolving. There may be, like, I'd say, the best I could imagine is that maybe as you hit these skill thresholds, like, maybe you get to level 40 and they'll look different. But I kind of doubt it, because one of the first things that really turned me off about this game was the fact that, like, we have Slime here, who's a very early monster, and then I came to this snow biome and there was a blue slime.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that as well. It seemed like, maybe that's the shiny version, or...
No, it's literally, like, a different biome version of the exact same thing. So it has completely different moves that are more ice-based, but... like, obviously, you can kind of look at, like, the stats even and be like, oh, okay, it's still more magic-based. Seems to have relatively similar stat pool. So it's going to be more magic-based. It's essentially going to be the same monster, except it's blue, and it's going to have more ice-based attacks. I get, like, pretty sure that's accurate, given Freeze, Chilling Wind, which is also going to be... can apply chills, so it's centered around, like, more, again, like, ice builds. As a shield kind of ability as opposed to a healing, which I believe Slime has a healing ability, and then has more water type kind of stuff, given, again, this is a regular Slime, as well as an earth type attack. And so they're not exactly the same, obviously. They are different monsters. They do have different, functionality in a team, but it kind of turned me off to see pretty much the same model relatively quickly into the game. Like, I'd say this is maybe less than 5 hours into the game.
So thus far, Slime is the only one that
that I've seen 2 of. Yeah, there could be more later on. I don't know. There could be no more, for all I know, as well. And so I guess, like, to go into, like, you travel the overworld in this 2D plane, kind of traditional platformer kind of style. I did get a double jump. You do not start with a double jump. And obviously that allows me to traverse areas that I wouldn't normally have been able to. And there are chests littered throughout the overworld, kind of like what you see here. I'm about to find this chest, and it looks like this is purely here just for the overworld's sake. And so this kind of gives me an excuse to go into, in the overworld, all of your monsters have these abilities that they can use. And I say abilities, it's really they do one thing that can do each of those things. So in this case, Ignite is going to burn vines and kindle torches and activate fire orbs. Whereas this can just break in walls. He can also break in walls, though. He can also break in walls, though, and cut through vines. can activate water orbs, levitates the player, activate ice orbs, so on and so forth. They all have different functionalities, but a lot of these perform the same functionality. Like, for example, levitates the player, levitates the player. It's the exact same thing. They're both flying. Burns vines, enkindle torches, activates fire orbs, so on and so forth. Breaks through hidden walls, cuts through vines, same thing, slash, claws, whatever. Activates ice orbs, activates ice orbs. And so even with this thing, creates a rock obstacle, creates a mushroom obstacle. Both of those do the same thing functionally. Activates ground switches, activates ground systems. They do the exact same thing functionally. And so a lot of this I have not found to be, again, super worthwhile or interesting, because essentially them having the same thing makes me go, it's really just whichever one you like more. So like in this case, me being able to levitate, if I press X, I levitate for a couple, I will not even, like, about a second at best. And same idea if I were to switch to any other ones, there's a little punch. And same idea, some little claws, there's just some ignite, and it's going to be, you know, a lot of the same. And so, you know, considering I have this, you know, obviously I could just do the double jump correctly and just make that. Or, fuck.
Oh.
Or, there we go. Or I can use the levitate to help myself get over there. And in this case, same idea. This is another piece of equipment that I can equip. Plus 28 magic, plus 33 magic regen. Seems pretty good. Just more magic damage and managed regen. Seems like it's good for a mage. So anyways, that's kind of how I've gotten a lot of this equipment. It's just in the overworld. You do get some of it, I believe, from defeating monsters and getting higher star ratings from defeating those monsters. But, like, I feel like that's most of the game, like I've described this far. Like, I haven't really gotten much else out of it. It seems like I could keep playing it. You know, this is this far what I've explored of the world. Doesn't even seem like that much. And each of these different colors, I would say, represents a different area. One thing that I can say that I haven't been able to show this far is that there are kind of like bosses that they refer to as champions. And those champions are essentially just like a single monster that's really strong. It's a boss fight, essentially. And the different champions have been able to do different things this far, and so on and so forth. But one thing I didn't show was obviously when I got those eggs, like, here you go. So I have these eggs. I already have a Frosty. I don't need to open that. There is an area back in your little hub in the map, I believe, over here in the little orange area. There's a guy you can talk to who will essentially go, hey, give me your eggs, and I'll give you something for them. I don't know what he gives you. I don't really care, ultimately. I think it's kind of like, if you think about Animal Crossing and you want to donate to the museum, it's kind of like that, is how it made me sound, or how it sounded like to me. So anyways, you know, I can open up a Caraglow egg, given this is the first one I've got. Hey, I have a Caraglow now. I can name it whatever I want. Just gonna name it Caraglow. And hey, I have an Armtail. Same idea. Name it whatever I want. And so now I could go in here and they just, you know, start out fresh. You have just, essentially, they're not quite where your max level is, I would say, and where your monsters are, but they do give you the opportunity to start kind of like speccing where you want with these monsters right out of the gate. So, like, I could just choose outright to not even put any points into Restore or Glory, and just put them all into, you know, the two abilities that it has right now. Typically, I just kind of immediately go and just start adding it in here, and just so I can see, like, cool. Auras always sound good to me. I've always just been picking auras in most cases. Healing Ashes can land a critical heal to heal for an increased amount based on critical chance and crit damage. So it seems like this monster could be centered around crits, given that there is literally a +5 crit chance here, as well as healing. But obviously you can see that there's also a lot of stuff over here in regards to physical damage and lifesteal and magic proc, and a lot of other stuff over here, and as well as more crit in regards to heals, so on and so forth. And so 50% chance to gain a random buff when landing a critical hit sounds pretty good to me. And so that's where, to me, I just say, oh, okay, I'm just going to keep dumping into crit because it sounds like that's what they want me to do, and probably just keep building as much I can into crit as to take advantage of those abilities. And so yeah, I mean, like, do you have any questions? Like, is there anything that I don't, that I haven't fully explained, or what do you think?
I believe you may have already covered it, but I was curious about the mana system. Does it automatically refresh after each combat?
Yes. Yeah. Like, I can show you now. And sure, let's, you know what, let me just... And so I guess one thing with this, I'm not even paying attention to what I'm doing, is that, like, when you get new monsters, they're not going to come with any equipment. So that means I'm going to have to go through and, hey, what do you know? I have a butt ton of equipment.
Oh,
because that's all stuff that's not even equipped. Like, all of these have stuff equipped. Every single one of them. So I just have a ton of this stuff laying around already. And so, like, let's just say in this case, I'm gonna switch you in for Punchy. I'm gonna switch you in for let's just say Slime. Let's go in and fight these guys. And so it's gonna take whoever's at the front of the party each time. So we're just gonna say, let's see, he's weak to fire, so let's take some fire. They're weak to both wind and water, and yeah, why not? And so all of them, you can see their mana amounts under their portraits there at the top. So 118, 192, and 148. Yeah, like kind of like what you said, they're gonna refresh after every battle. Everything refreshes after every battle. So like if you're thinking like, oh, I need to go back to a center, one might say a Pokemon center, and heal all of your monsters. No, it's not necessary. Every battle is self-contained, and you just kind of keep moving on, honestly speaking. One thing I will say, like kind of going back to the overworld and like the 2D aspect of it, I don't really understand thus far why there is an overworld other than to just make things more complicated and more Metroidvania-esque, and that they kind of, it seems like you're going to be getting abilities that you have to go back to other areas that you were in before to unlock everything. Like there have been things that I haven't been able to activate because I didn't have a monster that could activate it yet. So I'm going to have to go back to activate those things to, say, get a chest or whatever the case may be.
so like in the case you didn't have Rock Smash.
Pretty much, yeah, exactly right. Yeah, if you don't have Rock Smash, if you don't have this, you don't have that, you're just going to have to wait until you go defeat a certain gym or go to a new area and then come back at some point and essentially defeat that gym or get whatever it was behind that door or whatever the case may be. Like I think the prime example of what I saw thus far was like, oh, I didn't have the double jump yet, so I couldn't get up to a certain point to do what I needed to do. Let me see. I'll probably lose this battle, honestly. I don't think I've lost many of them thus far, and that's okay. Even if I did, not too concerned about it.
So to backtrack a bit about the eggs, I did notice that they just started off at level 10.
Yeah.
Is that normal for eggs, or?
So like what I was saying there, essentially is that like I'm not sure exactly what level they're going to start at, but it seems like they're just going to start probably at a level that is reasonable for where you are in the game. So eggs that I got earlier in the game started at like levels 3 and 4 because it was earlier in the game, whereas those eggs started at level 10, which I'd say is probably the lowest level for this area that I'm in. That would make sense to me at the very least. And so as you can see here, considering I don't have enough mana, I can't use Shred. Let's see. And honestly, I probably should be healing, because I'm probably going to start losing monsters. And actually, I guess this is a good opportunity, and I've never done it. What happens if I just switch? They just have full health. And so that's where I kind of say, like, that seems a bit silly to me that I can just switch in there, because had I not done that, that other Pokemon would have quote-unquote fainted. Whereas, and I said Pokemon, didn't I?
Yeah, you said Pokemon.
Cool. And I don't know, like, I guess, I'm not really sure, I don't think it's a bad game, I just don't think it appeals to me in particular, but I'm not really sure who this is for. Like, it seems like, if you like turn-based, like, kind of traditional JRPGs and you like Pokemon, this fulfills, like, both of those in some regard or another, but a lot of the monsters haven't really had, like, as much character as even the kind of least interesting Pokemon, in my opinion. No offense to the art team on this game or whomever the case may be. I just don't feel like there's a lot of character in the animations. I don't feel like there's a lot of character in the general sense. I mean, because like even you could say like I took my starter, right, and from the very beginning oh, I take my starter. There's gonna be other people that have the other starters, and lo and behold, within the first couple hours, they've now shown me the other guys that have the other starters that I did not pick. Have I had to battle them yet? No. Do I imagine that I might have to at some point? Probably.
So have they been introduced as rivals already, or?
I would say one of them has been introduced kind of as like a nerdy rival, yes, but not really like the strong, like super good fighter one. Whereas the other guy was literally like, I'm a badass fighter. I kick ass. So I think they're going to fulfill different rival niches, I guess is how I'd put it. But yeah, go ahead.
I guess I was kind of surprised, since Karaglow is crit based. I thought you would throw in maybe a Bomb of Snow with his buff. That would increase his crit chance and his crit damage.
Yeah, that's smart. You're right. I should have done that. As a matter of fact, I can. I think that's still kind of silly that I can do that. And the fact that it just tanked a hit. Because yeah, you're right. Like I can do Glory Cast. And there you go. Let me see here. And then pulling the screen up, obviously now you can see all the debuffs, all the buffs that either my team has or their team has. Just kind of all at the same time. Yeah, Glory increases critical chance by 10%. So really, Karaglow has a buff for its crit chance itself, and that Glory does that. So, given I just got this monster, wasn't fully aware, but hey, whatever. But I mean that seems like Monster Sanctuary to me. Is that about it for you?
It seems pretty accurate, yeah.
Alrighty. I don't know how to end.
I don't either.
Good enough.